Hi there. Welcome to New Tracks Modeling. New Tracks is an exciting new digital opportunity to obtain mentoring to help you improve your modeling. You will meet talented modelers and manufacturers from all over the world who share their model building skills and artistic advice. Improve your modeling and increase the confidence in your modeling efforts. Share your building efforts with fellow modelers and have some fun doing it. The shows are live on Zoom and YouTube, so be sure to join in and ask your questions. Now here is New Tracks founder and your host, Jim Kello, MMR.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really do appreciate it. Hope you'll join us a lot in the future and tell your friends about us. Before we start the show, I'd like to introduce Father Ron Walthers for the show's prayer. Father Walthers, welcome.
Creator of the world, as modelers and makers, we recognize the intricacy and beauty of our world. We thank you for the vision and artistry that you have given us. Continue to bless us with your creative spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father. We really do appreciate all of your help and guidance. Well, if you have not done so, please go to our website, newtracksmodeling.com, newtracksmodeling.com, and subscribe. We've got over 900 subscribers that we send out emails weekly to, and we'd like to include you in that list. You'll learn about the future things that we have lined up for our shows and about the scholarship program and other activities that we're involved with. So I hope that you'll go to our website and subscribe to it. I'd like to talk to you about our scholarship. I have several announcements tonight about our scholarship. The first one is we have two companies that have become brass donors. That is, they have contributed $250 or more to our scholarship fund. The first one is New Creations Victorian Railroad Buildings, and it's owned by Alan Rogers. Alan, thank you so very much for your contribution. We really do appreciate it. And the other one is by Dennis Brennan, who owns Brennan's Model Railroading. And Dennis, thank you so very much for your contribution. We certainly do appreciate that. We set our goal for this year, at least the preliminary goal, that we're going to raise $4,000. Well, here's $500 of it. And that goes some way towards us achieving our goal. And we really do appreciate these two companies that have made these kind of contributions to our scholarship program. Also, my other announcement is we've been told by our attorney that we need to have so many small donors in order for the IRS to be happy with us. So we need around 20, 30 individual donations of less than $80 to make the IRS happy with our 501c3. And it's surprisingly, but when we were talking about this and so forth, one viewer that likes to remain anonymous has donated $1,000 as a challenge match. If we can get other modelers to contribute less than $80, then this anonymous modeler will match all of those donations of $1, $5, $50, whatever, anything less than $80. This individual will match that up to $1,000. So if you can see your way clear to make a small donation to us, the best way to do that is through our Zeffy account. And it's easy to do. We've got, all you have to do is click on the figure here or go to our website and sign up with Zeffy there. But it's a very easy thing to do to make a contribution. And we need to get very small donations to cover the $1,000 challenge grant that this anonymous donor has made. If we can do that, and everybody that's contributing, for each dollar you contribute, it really amounts to $2. So I really hope, and frankly, the reason that we started this scholarship was to give everybody in the modeling community an opportunity to participate. And what better way than doing it with a small donation? We're not asking for an arm and a leg here. We just, a little bit here and a little bit there, a cup of coffee here or a cup of coffee there is what we're talking about. So if you can help us with this, we sure would appreciate it, because we don't want to lose the generosity of the anonymous donor of willing to match all of these donations up to $1,000. And again, we're not looking for large donations. Of course, we're looking for large donations too, but in this instance, we're looking to match this $1,000 challenge grant. The other thing that I'd like to mention is starting November the 1st, we're going to do something a little different here. And that is, we're going to have a sponsor for our show each week. For the next 6 months, that sponsor is going to be Brennan's Model Railroading. And Dennis was kind enough to be the first one that stepped up and offered to do this. And so he'll be the first one that will be the sponsor for each one of our weekly shows starting November the 1st. And Dennis, I do appreciate so much the support and frankly the faith that you had in us to keep us going and to help us pay the monthly bills. So thank you so very much. Next, I want to remind you that the Great Scale Model Train Show in Timonium is October the 14th and 15th. Scott Keir runs it. Some people say it's the greatest train show out there. I can understand why they might say that. Certainly in the mid-Atlantic region, I don't think there's any question. Scott has done a tremendous amount for New Tracks in supporting us financially, as well as telling other people about us and helping us with our scholarship. He's donated space to us and tables and that kind of thing so that we can attend his shows. And so I really do want to give him all the credit and hope that you'll consider attending his show, because he certainly has been awfully kind to us and to me personally. Jeff Jordan is here tonight. Next week, Jeff Jordan is going to do something that I have tried unsuccessfully to do before. And so I knew that Jeff was very skilled in using styrene. And I called him up and said, Jeff, would you show us how you build in styrene? So next Wednesday night is going to be the first of his shows where you're going to be able to watch him build this model in styrene. Jeff, you want to talk about this model a little bit? Because this is what the model looks like.
Yes, this is the finished model that I will be demonstrating how I built it from scratch using evergreen styrene and available castings and parts. It is scaled from an existing building, which I had the great opportunity to go out and actually visit and measure, though I will also be demonstrating how I draw plans for structures that I don't have the dimensions, and take you through the process of drawing your own plans, making your parts from styrene, putting them together, finishing the styrene, and other tips and tricks associated with building in styrene.
Well, I asked Jeff to do this because, as I say, I've tried and I've not been successful. I can build in basswood and I love to build in brass, but styrene, I can't handle it. So I thank you so much, Jeff, for doing this and showing us. Maybe we'll learn how to build in this medium. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I look forward to it.
We have a modeling lifestyle with Martin Breckbilt, MMR, as our featured guest coming up tomorrow. Should I continue, Pat, or what happened? Okay. So we have a modeling lifestyle show tomorrow night with Martin Breckbilt, MMR, as our featured guest. Many of you know Martin. He's built models on our show before, but Martin has done much more than that for our hobby. And if you get a chance, I hope you can join us tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on our YouTube channel. And our YouTube channel is New Tracks Modeling. to talk with Martin and to see what Martin's involvement in our hobby really amounts to. And I think you'll be amazed at the variety of things that he does and has done for our hobby. I think we have a short video that I'd like to run for this.
You cut me off, Phil.
Join the modeling lifestyle at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on September 28th, where we will feature the modeling lifestyle of Martin Brechbale. Martin is an O-scale modeler and builds an amazing array of cars, motor units, and trolleys. Join Jim Kello, Martin, and his friends as they discuss how modeling has been a major part of Martin's life.
And again, is tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel only, New Tracks Modeling. The next My Build coming up is October the 18th. The one after that is November 22nd. Hope you'll participate in both of them. The one in August, we have a slide, I think, that we can show for the one coming up on the 18th. Chris, of course, is not able to be with us this evening. He's in an airplane and flying somewhere. But this is going to feature an autumn kind of situation for Halloween. And if you can get the photos that you may have to Martin at his email address, which that's the wrong slide. There it is. His email address, which is railrunner130 at hotmail.com. And he told me he'd like to have the photos and information by the 15th of October, if possible. But we're really pleased about what's happening with the My Build segments. And I talked to Martin the other day, starting in January, what we're going to do is have a My Build almost take over the total show for once a month to start with on starting January's show schedule. And I think that's going to be interesting. We're hoping that we're going to get a lot more people involved, a lot more new people that haven't showed before, and give everybody a real opportunity to ask questions and to discuss what they built and how they built it, and show, talk about the techniques maybe that they used, and go into a little bit more depth about their modeling of all of these things. Because some of the models that are being shown, in my opinion, are just outstanding. There is no other word for them. We had one in-scale structure last week that I thought was just gorgeous. Last week we had O scale. The only scale that we didn't have, there were two scales that didn't show up. We had O scale, HO, and N. We didn't have any S scale, and we didn't have any G scale. Well, we're hoping that we'll get some of those in the future. To spread it out and to show what all of the scales are doing, because I think that's important. And again, the techniques, the skills of modeling, we've always said they're transferable between scales. They don't have to just relate to one scale. If you can do it in HO, you can do it in another scale. So we're really pleased about the reception that we're having with the My Builds parts of our show. And that's why we're going to start expanding it starting in January the 1st. So with that said, let's start tonight's show. And to start tonight's show, I'd like to turn to Gary Shurgold, NMR, who is building the Walthers plastic kit that's coming out to look like it is made out of wood. Gary, welcome. Is Gary not with us? There he is.
He's there, but he's muted. There you go. Are you unmuted, Gary?
Gary, I think you may need to select your microphone. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. So down at the bottom by the mute button, click the thing on the right and select the right microphone, that little up arrow. next to the mute button.
Let me do this. Let me come back to Gary because we've got such a full show tonight. And Phil, maybe you can work with Gary off screen to where he can get set up. But let me go to Tom Farrell for his scratch-built depot that Tom is working on for his layout. So Tom, thank you.
Yeah.
Can Tom get spotlight?
How are we? Can everybody,
Yeah, I see all your stuff there, Tom.
okay.
There we go.
Well, this evening I'm going to feature the Shantytown Depot, the finishing of it. I wasn't on last week. I was not able to, but this is part 2 of 2. So this evening I'll finish this depot that I began. This is where I left off 2 weeks ago. So it's was still pretty rough. I did accomplish the proper weathering of this model here, this side of the structure. And you'll see how I move forward here. So I started with the roof. This is these paper shingles that I've used in the past. They come laser cut in brown, like a brown cardboard type paper. I just painted them with a brush. I stippled a brown on there, and then I sampled a little white here. I was trying to get a certain look to it, which wasn't coming off there. But finally, I did get the look I was after. I mixed a chocolate brown with a white, all acrylics, and I got a nice base color of like a creamy chocolate brown, and then I dry brushed it with both brown and white and a little India ink, just a hodgepodge of three highlights, white acrylic dry brush, brown acrylic dry brush, and a little brown alcohol wash. And I got the look I was after. Next up, I made a very crude template to make these trusses. I just took some scrap styrene that I had. This is old N-scale siding and some Plastruct. I cut holes in the areas where the glue goes, because I frequently use super glue, even though I shouldn't. And if you cut holes in your template, it's not going to, the super glue is not going to stick to whatever you have underneath. Even if you use wax paper, I suppose you don't want to stick your glue to the template, is the theory here of cutting these holes. So I made these trusses. I had to make quite a number of them. So this is how they come off the template. And then I added these additional braces here. And then I painted everything a chocolate brown. And there's a close-up of them. If you've ever made it, someday I'm going to get a laser cutter. That's on my list, but for now I have to hand make these. So then I stack them up on these scale these are 2x10s, and I super glued them about approximately an inch apart, which is 4 feet apart in O scale. And I will go back and touch up the brown paint, but it's sort of a base coat. Then defying gravity, I glued this thing onto the side of the building. And later I went back and I sanded the tops of these so that the glue would have something to stick to on the roof. This is the bracing that goes underneath the pavilion that you just saw. And these are scale 4x4s. There's a left and right side. And then I glued them underneath, painted them. Still just a very rough paint right now. This is just first coat. You can see I have sanded the tops of these. You don't want to glue any glue onto paint if you can avoid it. Then I took 1/16 inch plywood and I painted the underside black, and I painted the top black, and I glued it on there. Actually, I didn't paint the bottom black. I pre-painted at the bottom black and then painted the top separately. Now this was the look I was going after, and once again I wasn't really happy with it. This just didn't look right. So the idea was to have a pavilion, an open covered space on each side of the model, but it just looked, to me, it looked unbalanced, and quite honestly, it looked a little goofy to me. So I did eliminate that. This is the pavilion roof. It's corrugated metal material. I sprayed it with an orange rust paint, and then I went back and weathered it with acrylic. So there's the base coat, and there's the acrylic weathering the rust. Then I still not convinced that this was going away. I wanted to see how it looked, this left-hand side here. Next photo, it's gone. So, but this is the pavilion as it is. So there's the model shaping up, temporarily placed on the layout. The left pavilion is gone. The weathering is proper here. The weathering looks good. I mean, overall at this point, I'm pretty pleased with the model, the structure. And now I began adding details. These are Artista O-scale pewter figures. There's quite a number of them here on this model, roughly 10 in all when I'm done. And I put a sign there, Shantytown. These are from, these are cast plaster from a fellow that makes plaster kits, Deco. I can't remember his name. But you could buy this whole box of these for fairly reasonable. They're cast plaster. They look really nice. These are just 2 pewter garbage cans, and this is a neat little scene. This guy's shining this guy's shoes. He's standing around watching. This is the other side. I put a fence up here. You'll see how this fits on the layout. These are just 4x4s, 2x6s, and 1x6s. I've demonstrated there's really nothing to making these fences. They come off really nice. These are the people. They're all looking for the oncoming train. I have some photos a little later here. Yeah, there you go. So there's the group of people on the right-hand side of the layout. There's a conductor, couple here, a dog, and these are just nice pewter figures. Looks like I have to touch this up a little bit right here. You can see this is the plywood base. All my structures are constructed on aircraft grade plywood. So in the event that I have to move, the structures come right out. Another view of the sorted personnel, passengers, conductor. This is the other end of the building. I have a couple of billboards there. This nice, I put a stovepipe on here for the additional detailing. I really like the way this weathering came out. I had to work for it this time. My last presentation, I mentioned how difficult it was for me to get this look. Normally, I paint a base color on there, a very bright yellow, and then I, with a wire brush, I scratch the base coat. Then I put a black alcohol wash on there, a gray alcohol wash, and then I highlight it with white dry brush. For some reason, this time it was a little bit more challenging, but I finally got what I was looking for. Beer, it's what's for dinner. Had to put that on here. And there's Coke for the people that don't drink. So now here's a placement on the layout. So my layout is constructed on 2-inch foam. And so I outlined where the depot was going to go. And then with a razor saw, I tried to carefully cut down the depth, about 3/8 of an inch or 5/8 of an inch for that plywood. And then I chipped this foam out in place and it kept test fitting. I didn't want to go too far down. I wanted it to sit at the proper height. So there it is in place. It's really a nice, handsome structure. I put a fence in front of it, all kinds of billboards. These are right off of, just Google searches for 1920, 1930 advertisements. There's a fence behind it. So there's fences everywhere. They're easy to make and they add a lot of detail. Once again, these window shades were just, I searched for antique curtains, and then I searched for wooden blinds. On PowerPoint, I put one behind the other, and that was the look. So that came off well. Just another look of the thing in place in the layout. It's
really neat.
It's a neat looking structure.
It really is. It's something really different.
Yeah. There's a little better shot of it there. And, these figures add a lot of, I talked about this before, it makes these structures come alive to put these figures in place, draws your eye. So you've got all kinds of little details here. You've got, these boxes and this dog and shining shoes. And so you're creating little scenes here. You can see I put a bumper in here. Which is scratch build, a real easy thing to do. And there's that stovepipe. Everything has a nice balanced weather to it. Not overly done, but definitely a little worn. Here's where it fits into the layout. So this is Shantytown. So these three structures and that boat I featured in previous shows. This is, of course, today's, now finished. Next up, these are background buildings here. I'm going to convert them into full buildings. That'll be probably in 2 weeks' time. All three of these actually are background buildings. So they need extended and finished. And I'm going to put in a wooden sidewalk here, like a boardwalk. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do first, but I'm either going to do the boardwalk or finish these buildings or some combination thereof. But should make for a pretty visually interesting scene.
Yep, absolutely.
And
I love that depot. That's really different. That is outstanding.
thank you for having me. And no, it came out really nice. I'm glad if you may recall, I had a freight depot that I didn't like, and that led to the building of this. So, yeah. Any questions?
You outdid yourself. That's beautiful work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So, Gary, are you ready now? I'll go back to Mr. Shurgold of no.
You're off. Your voice is not on there, Gary. You're muted. Unmute yourself. No, you're muted.
It's not a mute issue, Gary. It's you got to go down at the bottom and on the bottom left.
Let me come back. Maybe you can help him off camera. Anyway, let me continue with Pete Steinmetz, and Pete is going to talk about paintbrushes. Pete, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. Is Pete not with us?
I don't see him.
Okay, well, let's forget Pete tonight. Then I'd like to go to Bill Bozeman. Bill Bozeman lives in the same county that I do. found me by one of the newspaper articles that I've been writing, and came over and gave me 4 books that his dad had used when he worked for the Florida coastlines. And I started reading them and had no idea what it took to be a railroad engineer when steam was what you worked with. So Bill, thank you so much for the book. I'm enjoying reading them, but thanks so much for you being here tonight. I'd love to hear you talk about your dad and some of his experiences with being an engineer back in those days.
Well, my dad, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Good. My father went to work for the Atlantic Coastline Railroad in 1916 and worked with them till 1966 when he retired, mandatory retirement for executives. But he started out literally going around pouring oil into the signal lamps to keep them going and make sure they were all working was the first job he ever had. And later he worked his way up, and as he put it to me, he had the largest model railroad in the world. And that was being able to work on a steam engine. He loved it. And eventually he was promoted to assistant road foreman of engines, and then road foreman of engines over the Tampa district down here in Florida. But Dad was fired, and it's interesting railroad life. My dad was fired in around, I'd say, the mid to late 30s. And what he did is he made a classic mistake. He thought somebody was a good friend of his, and a gentleman was appointed as vice president, one of the vice presidents of the railroad. And my father made a comment, boy, they could have sure made a better choice than him. I think they'll regret it. And within 24 hours, he was called up and said, "You're fired." And he went to talk to a good friend of his in Sylvester, Georgia, and to see if he had a job. And he owned a small connector railroad. And this one happened to connect the Atlantic coastline with the central of Georgia. And it was probably a line that wasn't more than 20 miles long, but it's where all the freight was connected, went from one outfit to the next. And my father told him what happened, and he said, "Well," he said, "I tell you what, you'll have your job back in 24 to 48 hours. He says, "How are you going to do that?" And he says, "Just let me handle it." Well, he got the telephone call that told him that he was back in the employ of Atlantic Coastline, not to worry about it. But the man shut down the connector railroad for 48 hours. And things like that happened back then. But what's interesting is in 1902, J.P. Morgan, and I think it was Harry Walthers, they wanted to consolidate everything and bring all of the railroads together. And this was one of my father's stories. And consolidate the Atlantic coastline and the plant system, which was owned by Henry Plant. And it served mainly his hotel in Tampa, which is University of Tampa now. And J. Pierpont Morgan wanted Walters to buy it up. And he said, "Well, right now I'm not in a position financially to do that." And they were in Morgan's private railway car going somewhere. And he says, well, I'll take care of that. Don't worry. He says, where's something to write on? And there was a large cocktail napkin. And I can only assume that they made cocktail napkins out of a lot heavier material than they do today. But J. Pierpont Morgan took the cocktail napkin and wrote out a contract on it for, I believe it was either 14 or 16 million dollars for him to buy the plant system with, which went from Jacksonville to Tampa. And that's how, and that it was done with a handshake. And so things have changed a lot since then, to say the very least. And my dad also had the opportunity. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with the movie. It was called Winds Across the Everglades. And it was set in the early, I believe it was the 1920s, when plumage from birds was so popular in women's hats. Well, actually, probably more like the turn of the 1900s. And burl ives, and I made some notes. Let me check. I think it was burl ives and Christopher Plummer. It was Christopher Plummer's second movie. And Daddy had the opportunity to be the technical advisor to the movie company that was making it down in, I think it was Paramount, I'm not sure. And they had taken a station down in South Florida at one of the towns, and they made that Miami, Florida at the turn of the century. And they just took a sign and stuck it up on the end of the building. It said Miami. And they had a picture of my father that I've still got, large 8x10 of him sitting in an old Ford. And that was the first time that I realized, I thought, I made the comment to him. I said, Daddy, something's wrong with this picture. It got printed backwards. He says, if it had been printed backwards, Miami wouldn't be spelled properly. And I went, I don't get it. And he says, what are you talking about? And I said, the steering wheel's on the wrong side of the car. He said, the steering wheel was on the right-hand side of the car originally in the United States and got changed later. And I never knew that. But he had the opportunity to be the technical advisor to him. And he said that was the most fun he ever had. And I had a lot of fun, because when they had wrecks, which were never fun, but when they did have wrecks, occasionally my father would, if there had been no serious injuries or death on any of the wrecks, well, he would take me to them. He never took me to any of them where somebody had been killed. And mainly because one of the reasons probably is because of the fact that he knew everybody, because most of them worked for him as road foreman. And it was interesting to go out to where they had some of these wrecks, because one of them was down in the Everglades. And that was fascinating, out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, with alligators everywhere. But I think my father he considered himself to have been the luckiest man in the world because of the opportunity to work on a railroad, or as he said, a full-size model railroad of his own. And when he was required to retire at 65, that was the most miserable day of his life, because he did not want to. He could have kept going till the day he died. So, anybody have any questions?
Those were sure different times, no question about it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was,
He ever let you run one of the steam engines?
well, no, he never let me run a steam engine, but he did let me pull the handle on a diesel switch engine. And that was a neat experience because I was in my early teens. I think I was around 14. And he let me start it. And he warned me when I started, they have a big rubber mat in front of the starter button. And he says, you have to stand on that rubber mat for grounding purposes. And so I got to push the button that actually started cranking the diesel engine over. But the button had, I think, pulled something like 4,000 volts to turn the starter motor over. So, but that I never got to do anything on a steam engine, although I would have loved to.
Your dad was an officer during the Second World War with the railroad, right?
Well, Daddy in the Second World War was too old to be drafted, although they offered him an opportunity to go over to Burma to work on the rebuilding of the railroad over there. But my mother said something to the effect of, you won't find me at home if you do that. And it turned out to be a lucky thing because all of his friends that took him up on the job, most of them died within 10 years of coming back from various and sundry diseases that were picked up over in the jungle. So, but he was responsible for most of the coastline movement and actually some of central Georgia movement for transporting troops and such. And he had the opportunity to work on the train that carried President Roosevelt back and forth between Washington and Warm Springs. And my father, I've never fully found out the exact thing, but my father was related to President Roosevelt on the Delano side, on his mother's side. And I think President Roosevelt was his fifth cousin or something like that. So he had an interesting life, a lot more interesting than mine's ever been.
When did your dad start working for the railroad?
1916.
1916.
Yep.
And that was in Florida or somewhere else?
That was in South Georgia.
South Georgia.
Yeah.
And then he retired 65 years later.
Yep. He retired in 1966.
I'll be darned.
He had 50 years of service. All executives were at that time were required to retire at 65.
Yep.
And he had maintained his membership in the union the whole time. And they would use, the railroad would always use, when they had negotiations with the union, they would always use my father to help them negotiate because of the fact that even though he was an executive, he was still a union member. And he told me one time that one of the biggest concessions they got out of him is it was required, if a mechanical worker had to move an electrician's toolbox, he had to go find the electrician and have the electrician come and move the toolbox. He was not allowed to touch it. The owner of the toolbox had to move it. And one of the negotiations they had is my father said, well, we'll let you do this if you change that rule to where if a toolbox is in somebody's way, they can just move it. And they agreed to it. And he says they will never know how much money they saved in actual work time in the yards by doing that. He said they saved tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands a year in lost time. So
That's fantastic. I could listen to you all day. Does anybody have any questions for Bill? Bill, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us this evening and tell us about your day's experience. It's fascinating to me, and the books that you shared with me. I just can't get over what it must have been like to go to the school back then and to learn to be an engineer, and then actually have to do all of that work that it's outlined in the books that he had to learn. It's amazing.
Well, it was interesting because my father he had to go around to different places on the railroad to train engineers, firemen, and brakemen.
Uh-huh.
And he had 3 cars that had all the different equipment mounted in it to where they could actually sit there and handle it. And then he had his own private car, sleeper car of his own that he got to travel in while he was going around. So he had a good life.
That must have
And
been a really
when he retired, the railroad was very good to him.
yeah.
In fact, the board of directors paid him a supplemental salary retirement for just because of his years of service with him.
Well, it's obvious you're awfully proud of him, and it sounds like he had a marvelous life as a real railroader. And Bill, thanks so much for joining us this evening and sharing with us.
Okay. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, now I want to turn to Mr. Dennis Brennan, who is going to talk about art, and he's going to talk about photography. He's probably one of the best photographers model railroaders have right now. So Dennis, welcome.
Well, thank you, Jim. I'm glad to be here. And hopefully I can shed a little light on what it is that I do and what other people can do. So with that said, let me get to my first slide here. This is not it's not going where I want it to.
Let me maybe Phil can help you while we're
Okay, I think I got it.
You're all good. All good.
Yeah, I got it.
all right.
I'm not sure where I left off last week, but let's talk about this picture. This is a scene from the Sandy Harbor Railroad. And okay, so what makes this work? And what really makes this work, what makes this scene sing, is the fact that we have beautiful reflections. And that's not an accident. In a lot of model railroad photos, you see water, but you don't see the reflections. And in my opinion, it's the reflections that make the water. I mean, that's what makes it look so real. Now, what did I use for water? Shower door glass. Shower door glass I used it for a couple reasons. One reason is that this was a pretty big space. It was over 4 feet altogether. You're not seeing that much of it here. I think, and from one end to the other, it was almost about 6 feet. So I had to use a large sheet of glass that I ordered specifically from a glass company, and they cut it to my specifications. And the way it worked is I just painted the underside of it with a flat camo green paint, so that when you look down into it, you see dark green, like, because it's supposed to be in a harbor on the backside of the city. And that looks just like New York harbors if you peer down into it. And it's that simple. I did nothing else. And the deep reflections come about because the glass itself is about 1/4 inch thick. So think about how many layers you have to pour of anything else that you would use to get depth like that. And also, you can clean it with Windex. That's the beauty of it. You don't have to worry about scratching it. When it gets dusty, you just clean it with Windex. And the other thing is too, if you were going to pour something this big, you would actually have to cover it somehow so that you wouldn't get dust falling on that surface. At any rate, photographically speaking, to get those reflections, the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. So you have to find that sweet spot in positioning the camera so that you get the perfect reflection. And that's just a simple matter of looking through the viewfinder. Now, what you see in the reflections is going to be everything that's behind it. So you're seeing like the boxcar and the green part of the bridge. You're also seeing the pilings, and where it's white in the reflection, that is where actually the sky would be above those buildings. So everything you see is reflected, is what's reflected around it. So, and because of the shadow areas under the bridge, the glass is rippled, but because of the shadow areas under the bridges, it looks like the water is smoother back there. And that's just an optical illusion. It's still rippled, but it's just, and that just adds a little bit more to it because it looks like the water has ripples only in a few areas. And you wouldn't think that was possible with evenly rippled shower door glass. And the other thing I discovered about it too is that I was afraid that things would look like they were sitting on top of the glass and not in the water. And as you can see, you can't tell. You really can't tell. It does not look like anything is sitting on top of the glass, and it actually is. And that's a simple little optical trick that I use. You'll notice that it's realistically dark along the bottom where the water line is. Everywhere it's dark. Well, if you have dark and you have a reflection, that dark and the reflection of the dark hides the fact that something is sitting unseen. So at any rate, that's how I came up with that particular picture and that angle. Again, we have a diagonal line going across, which draws your eye into it. You've got a line that's pulling you in under the bridge, and then you've got this varied background. So all of this adds to the composition and adds to the art in the photo. Now, this is, everybody has seen this shot before. Well, a lot of you have. The art behind it is interesting. The art in the photography. That sky is nothing more than a seamless backdrop paper that was white. It's photographic backdrop paper that you shoot people on or whatever. I strung it across my studio, hung it, and coved the corner because this was an L-shaped layout. And then the layout was positioned about 3 feet from the backdrop. And I used various colors of blue light. Well, actually it was light with blue gels on it. And I used various intensities of light through those blue gels to create the slightly different color in the sky. And that makes it look real. The other thing is the camera angle again. Once again, we've got a very realistic camera angle that looks as if you're standing right there. The subject matter, all of this adds to it. The subject matter is just an ordinary scene. There's nothing spectacular about this. It's as if the photographer just happened to be in the right place at the right time and just grabbed that shot. The bus is leaving the scene. The engine is crossing the bridge, and it just worked out very well. And the little details, I mean, as good as the photograph is itself, I mean, the technique with the light and the shadow, that's the other thing. The light looks like strong sunlight. And a lot of times you're told, I mean, a lot of photographic lure says, you shouldn't create shadows, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you can use shadows, but you have to do it correctly. And that's what makes the scene come alive. It gives you a time of day. It gives you a sense of weather. And so, and as technically good as this photo is, it wouldn't be any better than the modeling that's there. And the modeling comes from little simple understated details, like the schmutz, the difference between where the pavement ends and this kind of gravel road goes up to, we don't know where in this picture, it doesn't matter. It's probably an employee road that goes up to a building somewhere on the railroad, would be my guess, if I was just looking at it and didn't know. And then you see all this little schmutz along the thing. That's nothing more than some ashes. And then there's a little sewer grate, and we've got a little bit of exhaust going up the bus. And the bus being in that position is no accident. That is it gives a nice little pop of color to balance out everything else. And so your eye may be initially drawn to that, but then you look and you see the various houses up behind here, and you come around and you notice the engine, and then you'll see the Denny Loves Sandy on the bridge. And then you see another little thing here where the person who wrote that probably decided that was too far, because in order to get Denny Loves Sandy, he was reaching out and holding on to the railing while he wrote that. So at any rate, that's part of what makes that photo work as well as it does.
Dennis, let me ask you a question, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Go back to that photo.
Oops. All right. Let me see if I can get back there. Oh, hold on. I got to go the other way. Oops. I just lost my show. Hold on. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry I asked the question.
Oh, no. It's here. I can get it back.
Just minimize that window. Just minimize that window. There you go.
All right, now I just got to click through it. Oh,
There,
this one?
that one right there.
Okay.
All right, so I'm standing there with my cell phone in my hand, and I want to take a picture.
Okay.
What went through your mind? Why did you decide to hold the camera in the position that you held it to be able to achieve that photo? Because looking at the photo and hear you talking about all of everything you see, I understand that. But when you walked up to the layout with camera in hand and looked through the viewer and saw that, what made you think at that point, I want that picture?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I've seen that kind of a photo in my head. Okay, I'm a very visual person, and I can see things ahead of time. So I visualized something like that. I designed this scene. It was only one place where I could have the street dip under the bridge. And so after I designed that scene, I knew I wanted to take a picture of the train going over the bridge. And so when I walked up to it, that's where I positioned the bus. I just roughen a camera angle first. I set my camera where I think it should be, and then I tweak things. Now, to get the angle, I wanted it to appear as if I happen to be standing there as a miniature person. I had to be standing somewhere back there, and I moved in with the camera. So, and then it's just a matter of balancing everything out. And I'm not sure exactly how to explain that. I'm actually pretty good when I pick a spot, because I can visualize it in my brain. And so I'll just set up my tripod and set the camera, and then I'll move the tripod in and out, or I usually know what focal length I want to use. So it's a matter of, like, say I want a normal lens shot. It's a matter of then putting the camera on the tripod, moving it back until I get the framing exactly how I want. I'm not sure if I actually answered your question, but.
And in addition to moving your tripod and all of that, what you actually do is you put the truck exactly where you want it. You put the diesel exactly where you want the engine. If the boxcar is not there, you go get a boxcar and you put it there. In effect, you are creating the scene that you're going to photograph, and then you're taking a photograph of it.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
Gotcha.
So I will set, typically, like when I go on a shoot for classic toy trains, any of the pictures that appear in that article are completely set up by me. I bring the train over, I position the cars, I'll position figures, I'll position a person, I'll remove something with permission, of course, that's in my way, that might be in the foreground. And then I also will then light it and then tweak things so that you'll notice, like in this shot where the bus is, that's no accident where that bus is and where I put the light. It's the light fell exactly where I wanted it to, and I moved it around until I got it exactly where I wanted it, so that I didn't want to see too much of the bus, yet I didn't want the whole bus to go in shadow. So it was just enough. If it was out any further, it would have detracted from the scene.
So from a non-photographer standpoint, which that's me, what you're really telling me is I need to create the scene to where when I'm seeing it with my eye, I say to myself, yeah, that's got the detail that I want. That's the picture I want. Then I go to locate my camera to take a picture of that scene and make sure that I've got any shading or anything like that involved, right?
Exactly. That's
Okay.
exactly right.
There's
Exactly.
more to this than I thought, Dennis.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not as simple as it looks. If you're trying to create a photo like this, now don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that it, and I don't want it to sound like you have to understand every single aspect of this. I've developed this over years of work. Okay. So it wasn't always this easy. I've always had a good head for composition, but I've done this so much now that I kind of just know where to put things and I know where to put my camera. But I don't want anybody to feel discouraged. I happen to be a professional, but it's not that. Anybody can kind of get a sense of things that work. And the best way to do it, if you've got a cell phone or you got a camera, because everything's digital now, you're not wasting any time or money. You might spend a little time, but you're not wasting money. Take a picture, put your camera, set your stuff up, put the camera where you think it needs to be. Don't worry about lighting at this point. Just put the camera where it needs to be, where you think it should be, and take a picture and then look at it and then pick it apart. Usually people have an innate feeling when something doesn't look right. You know when it looks good, but you don't know often. Oftentimes, you don't know why it's not working. So if you take a picture and it just doesn't feel right, then keep playing around until it does. That's the best thing I can say. And you just take picture after picture. The more pictures you take, the better you're going to get at it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I got 2 minutes and 58 seconds left.
Oh, I'm sorry I took up so much time, but
That's all right. That's all right. I want to move on a little bit here. This is another shot. What's so cool about this shot? Well, there's a lot of depth. This loading dock pulls you right into the scene, and then you got this overhead crane. And again, all these little details. The loading dock is actually one of my kits that is based on an actual loading dock that used to be here right in town, and it was abandoned. And I went and took pictures of it, dug around underneath, and found revealed how it was actually supported. And I made this thing exactly. It's an exact scale model. The only difference is I shortened it just a tiny bit. Otherwise, it's scale lumber and everything. This overhead crane is a Bachmann Plasticville signal bridge that I kit bashed using HO girders on top, and I scratch built the little housing for the motor that holds that raises and lowers the chain, and then I put some HO scale rails up there that would move this, that could move this back and forth. You can move this back and forth on. And then of course we have a figure here and a figure here. This guy is just standing there like a lot of supervisors do, and just kind of letting somebody else do all the work. And again, we have some street schmutz, is what I call. And we have the engine back here, and this just kind of pulls you right into the shot. And you'll notice again, there's a shadow. The light is coming from the upper right. Okay, so it looks like Oh, I still got a few minutes left, don't I?
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right. So that's enough for that one. Let's go and move on. Here's another shot from, now this is a different angle from that same area that we saw the engine and the bus going under the bridge. Completely different angle. Now, the way oops, didn't mean to do that. Okay, the way I positioned the camera on this one, the idea was that over on the close side of the bridge, there was another area similar to what you see over here, and that's where the photographer was standing with his camera. So you have a photographer's point of view. I'm not shooting at a lower angle. I'm not shooting at a higher angle. That's just my line of sight. And again, you'll notice this is a vertical shot too. And that gives a whole different feel to this. And I used a longer lens. I don't know what end of the lens exactly what the millimeters were, but you can see that it feels a little bit compressed. I used more of a telephoto end of the lens shot on this to get that. Okay, here is a shot that I took on a customer's layout. And this was also featured in Classic Toy Trains. Again, I used backdrop paper across the background here. And that was a real pain because this was a long, long place to try to lay. But the idea is that you get pulled into the shot. Now, the one little critique I have about this one is I wish I had the truck back a little bit further. It's too far into the shot. It's okay, but I think it would have been better had I pulled it back further. But that's just me. And so again, this shot, I think what makes this work is because we're looking, again, it's a person's view, kind of a regular view that somebody might have if they were standing there, and we're shooting under something. It's actually under a bridge that has a railroad, a high level line on it. And that actually gives you a nice frame for the picture. It really frames the shot, and the road again pulls you in and the truck pulls you into the shot. And the color of the blue truck against the red, against the buildings in the background and against this is no accident. Everything was positioned exactly where I wanted it, except after looking at the shot for so long, I decided I rather would have had it back here for the truck. But anyway, that's where that is. Okay, this shot, now this one is a little bit different than I usually take, but this was another layout that I shot for Classic Toy Trains. And I liked the way it looked compositionally. And I wanted to show that we were really up there looking down. And so the photographer in this case, he might have been standing on that bridge top. It's probably not very realistic, but I think it works. It works for me anyway. And there's a lot of, again, why did I use a blue caboose and a red? There's red here, there's blue here, there's blue here, and there's red here. And we have yellow in the middle. All these colors kind of balance out one another. So it's just a matter of playing with color. I'm playing with color, I'm playing with angle, I'm playing with lens selection. Now this is an overview shot of the Sandy Harbor Railroad. Now this shot, because we have so many tall buildings around here, this shot could have been taken right from the back porch of another structure that you're not seeing. The photographer was holding that camera and taking a shot. And really what he was trying to shoot was the train. But of course, he was a little bit late, and so he couldn't get the engine. He's just getting the train going through the photo. The train is not the important thing in this shot. And that's the other thing that you need to think about. The train does not have to be the hero in every shot. What we want to do is create something that feels right. And the one thing that's common about all of these photos is that they feel right. There's nothing that seems out of place. There's nothing that draws your attention more than anything else. Part of I think what I try to do is not make heroes. Occasionally there will be, but I try to make a scene that just feels kind of normal. And in this case, we have a typical city scene, and there's a lot of depth to it, and yet it's not that far from the foreground to the background. What we're looking at is about 12 feet, maybe 15 feet from the foreground here to where these buildings are. Now, part of what makes all of this work is these buildings up here are HO buildings. These buildings down here are all O scale. And now the HO buildings are all kit bashed. They were all Walthers kits that I kit bashed into bigger structures, because if I used them the size that they would normally be, it wouldn't work. But by kit bashing them into something bigger, it fits in nicely, and you still get that same sense of perspective. And no matter where you look and how you walk, you could walk around this layout. It didn't matter, even though this building here and this building roof that you see here, these were real close to those buildings. And even with them being that close, you didn't notice the difference. And that's because I chose window sizes in the HO buildings that were big. Now you can see, if you look at the window here compared to the window in the O scale model here, it's pretty much the same size, or maybe even a little bit bigger. And that was the key to me when I was doing this, was to find windows that were big enough on these buildings so that it would kind of match up, because nobody knows how big a window is supposed to be. But if it doesn't scream out, now, like if you see this little tiny windows here, if I put that over on this side of the picture, it wouldn't have worked. And that's what I played with a long time, moving buildings around, trying to figure out how to make this work. And you'll also notice that the skyline is not even at all. I mean, we have all of these things sticking up, interrupting the skyline. There's all these angles, all these little buildings, all these little, that all adds to it. And you can also tell that there's a color palette that I'm using here. They're all pretty much earth tones. Nothing pops out anywhere. And that is not an accident. Okay, here is another shot that I took on a customer's layout. And the thing is, this is a reverse kind of force perspective. This cart in the foreground was actually out of scale, way bigger than the car. And then the building back here is HO. So you can go the opposite way in a photograph. It might look weird on the layout, but in a photograph, you can make it work the opposite way. And you'll also notice that another hallmark of what I do is that I try to keep everything in focus that's critical. An out of focus foreground does not work in photography for model railroads, as far as I'm concerned. The minute it's out of focus, then it says model, 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 model. Because in real life, you wouldn't see that typically. So if you have to make a decision about what to keep in focus, Set it so that you keep your foreground sharp. And if you can't keep it sharp, then move the camera or change your lens angle, change something. The background can go soft like this. That's fine. But the foreground in your object should be as sharp as you can get it. That helps. That helps. Now, sometimes I can violate that rule if the foreground is very plain, like if you're shooting and there's a street and it's flat and there's not a lot of detail in it, it can be out of focus and you won't notice it. But if you have an out of focus telephone pole or a sign in the foreground, you've killed the shot.
Well, it's beautiful photography, no question about it. Listen, I'd hate to cut you off again, but I got to move along here.
Okay, that's fine. It's at 16 minutes. So
Yep.
There we go. Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions, I'm glad to answer them.
We do have a comment from one of our YouTube viewers saying that they wish they could pick your brain about kit bashing.
Well, you know what? Maybe I'll do maybe we can do a whole thing on kit bashing.
We can do that. We can do that.
Yeah,
We
I
can
have
do
a lot of good ideas about how to approach it. So yes, we can do that.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you, Jim. And thank you for, thanks for everybody who's paying attention to my diatribe.
I don't know about everybody else, but it's extremely informative for me because I had no idea about the work that you were doing about moving everything around before you even took the picture. So thank you so much for explaining that.
You're welcome.
Well, now let me go back to Mr. Shurgold, Gary Shurgold, MMR, to see what he's been doing with our Walthers kit. Gary, are you still not available or?
He's there. Gary,
Well,
wake up.
None of the microphones work, huh, Gary?
let me,
We'll have to try to get it working next week, probably, Jim.
yeah, okay. Gary, sorry, it just didn't work this week, but try to do it next week. Well, let me move on to Steve Sherrill for his, what do you want to talk about? And I think tonight he's got a subject that, frankly, he's talking about because some modelers sent me emails and said they wanted to hear it. So Steve, welcome.
Thank you. Well, we're going to start tonight talking about battery power, dead rail. I'm going to introduce you to an inexpensive way of getting introduced to battery power. First up, I think we're going to show a video that was made 9 years ago. It was made on my railroad by Joey Ricard from Trackside Scenery, and which we talk about battery dead rail. And he had to ask some questions, and we show some things that I did for some models that he had made. So Phil, if you want to show that.
Steve, what do we have here?
We're looking at conversion of this lab from GCC to battery-powered radio control with a Dell Tang RC system, which is 2.4 gigabytes. It's extremely small. The parts are in the tender of this porter. I just installed for Joey Ricard. It gives you full control. It does not support sound at this time. If you look at the controllers for this, here's the size of it. It's just a little bit bigger or smaller than a pack of cigarettes. If you compare this to a standard control, you can see the size difference. We have the speed control on these is absolutely wonderful. We can make these locomotives creep and we don't have to worry about dirty track. It will almost pull itself on the ground if it's derailed.
That definitely is a big consideration that a lot of people have, is the condition of their track and the electrical connections. I myself have to worry about that at train shows with the spruce coal and timber layout, where there's a lot of dust that comes in overnight. The next day you come in, the layout's dirty.
For the locomotive,
That's small.
that's very small. It's less than an inch by a half of an inch, and it will run this locomotive for almost 2 hours of continuous running. Installation for this particular system only takes about 30 minutes. It depends on the access to the electrical wires which go to the motor. It's 2 wires to the motor and 2 wires to the batteries, and that's it.
Now, how do we charge this locomotive up when it runs out of gas here, so to speak?
Well, what I've done in the installations that I do, I put a charging port in the back, which we put the charging lines in. This is just a simulated right here.
Gotcha. So in theory, you could have a locomotive shop and have a wire that comes out somewhere that pulls out, and you could charge your locomotive up there while you're running around the layout with the other locomotives. Is that right?
Correct. You can leave it on the track, or you can take it off the track. Now, because you're equipped with reed switches, which are activated by batteries, if you look down, you'll see a green light come on. Green light came on. If you can see that flashing.
See that.
Okay. Once that becomes solid and we bind with the controller, it is now ready to run. When it comes time to turn it off, we just have a button on the transmitter and we just turn it off.
Seems pretty easy. How easy is the installation for someone putting in the charging port, and how much room did you have in this particular tender here? And the other question I want to ask for everybody is, if you don't have a tender like this, now I built this tender to house a speaker when I had the DCC unit in there, but how would you be able to do it in a standard porter? I think that's probably, a lot of people would want to know that.
Well, I don't have a standard porter, but I do have a Davenport. This Davenport has the battery in the cab, the charging port in the back, as you can see right here. It has the receiver, and I've used a step up, which steps the current up from 3.7 volts, which is what this battery has, to 12 volts. And so that means it will run and pull a lot more. This is one of the old AHM 1970s Plymouth diesels that I have converted. They never were very good runners. They, once the wheels got dirty in the 70s, people kind of got rid of them. This particular one has the charging port under a light.
Interesting.
So when you finish charging, you can put the light in, and nobody even knows it's there.
Now, the next question somebody might have is, what about lighting? What about headlights and backup lights and things like that? What's the current status on being able to use that?
Well, everything you add to the battery usage will decrease the amount of time that you can operate your locomotive. You can put lights on it. You can put directional lights. I'm not a big light proponent. I don't think they're of any value. If you use yellow lenses that are available, you can simulate lights on in the daytime, so you don't need it.
I can certainly see someone with modern diesels and things like that want to have lights, and that would be a consideration.
Certainly do that.
But definitely for people of the steam era, and especially what we're doing here with ON30 and the smaller early 1900s type stuff, it probably doesn't matter that there is a headlight. And to be honest with you, on my railroad, at this point, it doesn't, no consideration.
Right. But you can do it. There are a lot of receivers that Deltang makes, which will allow you more and more servos which gives you more and more opportunity to add different lights.
Gotcha. Go ahead.
These are the components that go into the Deltang system for the installation. You have the receiver, you have the battery or batteries, depending on how much current you want to run through, and the transmitter. This is a transmitter that's already built, available at Deltang. You would just put a 9-volt battery in it to activate it. This locomotive has 7.4 volts, where we have linked up two 3.7 volt batteries put together.
So there's two batteries in that one.
There's two batteries in that one. This one has one 3.7 volt battery. It's larger in size, has more milliamps, which allows you to operate longer. Because of the size, we went with these two, which will give you a little over 2 hours, and this is probably about the same. A little over 2 hours.
It just won't be able to pull more.
We just won't pull more, yeah. If you look at an installation here, you can see how these batteries have been linked together and painted so they're not visible through the windows. Here's the receiver on top, the battery's underneath, and then the motor is underneath that, and you can wire right in. I have double back tape so it doesn't move around when I take the cab on and off.
Now, is there anybody in the U.S. that does these installations yet? Is there any kits that are available, or is this all at this point pieced together? Because I know you're a proponent of the Dead Rail Society, and I know you get on some of the message boards and the Yahoo groups and talk about it. But what can the average person that wants to go to battery power and radio control, what do they need to do?
Well, you get a lot of help on the forum groups. Free Rails,
Railroad Line and
Rail Line Forum. They have some. The Dead Rail Society is out there. If you Google Dead Rail Society, you can contact them. They'll be able to help. I believe there's an article in the ON30 annual this year with the Dead Rail Society did a article on installation of sound with their radio controlled battery powered. I believe there's 4 companies that are doing battery powered at this point. And this is only the one Deltang that I'm talking about today that I prefer. I'm seeing the others, they all work, so you just have to make your choice. This is probably the least expensive way to go. There are lots of components that you can put together if you have, depending on how much how many amps you're going to need, whether you want to build the units yourself or whether you want to get them ready to run. There's lots of opportunities here. Okay, so what you saw there was kind of an introduction 10 years ago now. You have to remember there's been a lot of new stuff out there. We have Blue NAMI now, which supports battery and dead rail. We have several others that I'm not really familiar with at this time. But what I'm going to introduce you to is the most economical way of getting into dead rail. I'm going to show you now some of the components, I think.
You had them a minute ago.
I did?
Yes, right there. Oh, you got rid of them again.
Okay, because I don't see them.
Do what you just did a minute ago. There.
Gotcha. Okay, so you can see the different batteries. Here's a battery that's 7.4, and it will need to be balanced. And later on, we're going to show the chargers and what balancing does.
Pat, can you help Steve get his camera so that that's all we're seeing is just what he's showing?
That's it.
That's all you want to see right now.
That's all you want to see.
Yeah.
Because what I'm seeing is 9 different pictures.
9.
7 different people on the Zoom plus the battery shot. That's what I'm seeing right now on my screen.
There, can you see that?
It's one of nine small, very small pictures.
There you are. Okay. So here's the very small one, about 80 milliamps. Now that probably wouldn't run but 30 minutes. You can see the side of it next to a quarter. Here is a race car receiver. Here is a Deltang receiver. You can see the size of them next to a penny. But what we're going to do for our presentation is we're going to take a race car, RC race car, and we're going to put that into a diesel locomotive, and we're going to make it work. And I'll show you how to do it. And then it comes with this type of control, which is a standard pistol grip type thing. And then Bob Gelmacher is going to go over how to convert the insides of that into and make a more familiar controller. So we also have another kind of dead rail. This is actually was made by MRC. They've sold this part of the company to another company now, which now makes it. It's available. And this one actually has sound in it and had its own controller. And you can fine tune this particular one on your DCC if you have a DCC system. It's not as good as, say, it's the Blunamis that are out now by Soundtracks or some of the other fancy sound units. It is very inexpensive though, and if you're going to consider attempting to try to get into dead rail, these are the ways to go inexpensively. So if you decide you don't want to be in dead rail, you haven't spent a lot of money.
How much money are we talking about?
$15 for that.
It's about as cheap as it gets.
Now, I got those special. They're now $25, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's got a $71 on it. I got this from Klimojevich at anyway, Klimojevich, if you look him up in the phone book, he's in Pennsylvania. Warrior Run Locomotive Works. He has these, and he would be, I don't know what the price is up there, but this one, if you're working with locomotives that have are DCC ready, this has an 8-pin plug. You literally plug this in and you remove the 2 wires that go to the track and you hook them to a battery and you're ready to go. You will need 2 AAAs, I think, to go in here. But that was about as easy as it gets for putting it in. Otherwise, you have to hardwire it in. It's not that difficult, but certainly it's got very adequate sound. It's got, I forget how, 6 or 7 whistles, 6 or 7 bells. You can access all these things. You hit a couple of those buttons and it says program on it, and you program it to what you want. And when you're done, you hit the buttons again and you program off, and it will retain whatever settings you've made on it. It's not bad at all. The speaker can be replaced with a Cube or some other speaker if you like, if that's too big. But that's a complete sound system.
Can you send me an email or something, Steve, with how I contact that person?
Sure.
Thank you.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about is a lot of different, the terminology is going to be different. And so we're going to be going over some of that. And you're going to hear things like volts, milliamps, gigahertz. I know in that film, in the video, it said gigabytes, but you know, that was me. Transmitters, electronic speed controls, receivers, reed switches. We're going to learn to bind. We're going to review some chargers. We're going to explain step-ups. And then we're going to go over some basic components that we're going to need. There's a train show this weekend, and I'm going to go and look for a very inexpensive HO diesel that we can convert using the RC car during one of our sessions. And so I'll be looking for that this week at the train show in Martinsburg at the Roundhouse. If you've never been to that, it's a pretty good train show, and it's in a very nice location. I think the Roundhouse was built in 1876 or something like that. Very nice, very nice. The CSX main line runs right beside it, and there'll be lots of trains. So it's a good place to go. $6 you get in. So are there any
I'm looking forward to that, Steve. I think this is exactly what the people that sent me the email, it's exactly what they want to see.
Well, we're going to do it's going to be very basic. Bob Gelmacher is going to help me out a lot on this. He's an expert on the soldering iron. He's also has made the new version of the controllers, which makes them much easier. You know, we're just not too familiar with the use of the pistol grips for binding and control. But if you learn how to do these, it's just a much more familiar operation. And most of the guts in this come from that controller right there. There's a few things we have to get, but everything is readily available. And I'm going to go over where to get some of this stuff. You know, like eBay, manufacturers, electronic suppliers, hobby shops have some of this stuff. Most hobby shops do not know about dead rail. They don't have enough call for it. And so they're just not that familiar yet. But this new Blue NAMI is going to put them in a situation where they're going to have to learn, because I believe that this is a great introduction to someone who wants to do using DCC they already have and putting dead rail in there also, because you can do DCC, dead rail. I think even DC they'll do. I'm not sure on that, but it's a very good system, and it's a Cadillac version. But you know, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube right now concerning the products that are available, soundtracks and all. And I think we're hoping to get the soundtracks, George, from him, to give us a little talk on it. And I don't know if Phil can get that or not. He's mentioned it.
You know, it's an interesting question. Does anybody have DC on their layout still? Is anybody just a DC person?
Gary is.
Gary, few. Greg, not very many. So, you know, one of the things that, you know, is so interesting about dead rail is the idea that, you know, a lot of people, the reason they haven't gone to DCC is, you know, if you've got 30 or 40 locomotives, cost of going to DCC, there's two costs. One is you have to do the wiring to rewire your system, and that's kind of about a $500 to $1,000 base cost to get into. Depending on what you buy. By the time you buy some cabs, and I understand you can buy cheaper if you use phones and that kind of thing, but if you buy an NCE system or an MRC system or a Digitrax, and 2 or 3 cabs for people to a couple of cabs to operate, you're into it for a chunk. And then you have to put decoders in your locomotives because you're kind of running one or the other. If you've got a 2-cab DC system, if you have a dead rail, and it doesn't really matter how it's built, whether it's the kind of the technology Steve's talked about here, some of the dead rail technologies, or Blue Nami with a battery. The beauty of it is if you've got one of the charge circuits that lets you charge it off the tracks, it's charging while it's running around on the 12-volt tracks, but it's only getting power from the tracks. And then it's doing all the rest of the activity, wireless. And the nice thing about the Blue Nami is, and this is why I think it'd be interesting to have George come in and talk to us, is, you can take 2 or 3 engines on take your 2, 3, 4 most popular engines, put Blue Nami and sound in them. By the time you get done and pay somebody to do it, it'll be $250 an engine. But now you can still run all your DC powered engines just like you always did in a block, but you can run the battery powered engines in the same blocks or anywhere on the layout. And so it's a really pretty interesting thought process about, how do you not go through the process of rewiring your layout, but still have that capability when people come in, there are, 3 or 4 engines that have sound and can be operated independently on the layout. And, if you want to operate, it lets you actually do most of the operations that way, where you can still run, some mainline trains with DC as well. So I think it's just some really interesting options. I think it's great for Steve to talk about it.
Well, Steve, I really appreciate you taking this on, and I really do. I know you're a little hesitant, but I really do appreciate you taking this on. And I think tonight is a great introduction. Let's face it, to get the basic hookups that you need and a controller for $15, that's kind of hard to beat.
Well, now remember, this is as basic as you get. I mean, it'll go forwards and reverse. You will have some speed control, but it's not a Blue Nami. Okay, it is what it is. It's much better than cleaning track. I can assure you of that. And
as a person who still operates with DC, what you're talking about is basically what I have right now.
Yeah. And the system, the way I use it is I have a battery car, and I can use the battery car and hook up to any engine I want. So I don't have to charge. I charge the battery cars up and then just put a different battery car on behind it and connect it in. It gives a lot more flexibility, and it's just easier to deal with as far as runtime. But I know that when I operate my layout, I have like a 3-hour operation, and it will run, any one of these engines will run for 3 hours on the layout. So, that's one of the questions people always want to know: how long will it run? How much does it cost? Where do I get this stuff? I've talked to lots and lots of people, and they're the basic questions. It's almost like, what coupler do I use? And you have to kind of lead people and show them exactly. They want to see exactly what it looks like when it's completed. And you say, well, here, take a throttle and see how it runs. And they, oh, I don't need to do that. So they're a little hesitant. I don't know whether they think it's going to electrocute them or something, but they don't. They just don't seem to want to run it. But it's very, very simple. Very, very simple. And Bob Gelmacher's made these controllers for me that, it just, it so makes us so familiar with what we're using as model railroaders, you know, and then the other one with the touchpad, it's a little bit different, but everything that we have in our household has a touchpad, but it's just unfamiliar for model railroaders. So they're a little hesitant on that, but once they get that system down, they say, oh, that's great. So it's familiarization, you know, and as battery guys, we love to talk to the non-battery people, you know. I mean, I've got my micro layouts I can take anywhere. I don't, you know, all I need is an outlet somewhere in the building if I have to charge a battery. And it makes it so much easier. I could be in the middle of the floor, or I can be next to a wall with a charger, with an electric outlet. And when we get into the chargers, we're going to learn a lot about charging the batteries. Again, different chargers, different places you buy them. You know, I'll be making some recommendations, I hope. And it's just going to be fun. We're just going to have some fun with this, you know, because I'll never get under a layout again, a wire. I can tell you that. That day is gone for me. And as an early DCC user, when it first came out, I had it. And what a nightmare. I'm not computer oriented. And I had a nightmare trying to figure out how to get that stuff to run. CVs, all that, the X's and O's and all didn't mean a thing to me. So when battery came along, I was right there. But, you know, I've been doing battery probably since the middle 80s, from G scale on down. I do believe that you can do, I think Klimajevich has it in HON3. And I think you can get it down to N. You know, it's just a matter of how much power it's going to take. I'd have to look at the motors and see how much they draw. But most of them would draw 3.7 volts, you know, and you can step up the voltage. And then that's done real easy. And again, inexpensively. And eBay, we can get the stuff really cheap. You can buy them 10 at a time. You will have to have some parts, meaning connectors, step ups if you want to go that way, wire, extra wire, soldering gun. So we're going to have to learn some new skills maybe. And so again, we're going to do this. And so I'll be looking for a locomotive this weekend. I'm not going to spend more than $10 for it either. I'm hoping the guy tells me it doesn't run, because that's when they're really, you know.
Well, I'm looking forward to this. I really appreciate you taking the time to do it, Steve.
Well, no problem at all. No problem at all.
All right. Well, Phil, I sent you an email a few minutes ago that Dan Cohen had sent me with a video in it. It must not have come through.
No, I'm looking for it. Go ahead and you can go ahead and run the other one if you want to first.
Okay. First, let me ask this question. We asked it, I think, and we got a lot of great comments before. Which segment of the show did you most enjoy that you saw tonight? And if you can send me an email, jimkello@newtracksmodeling.com with your choice, then it'll help us try to understand really what you're most interested in, and we really do appreciate it. We have, I hope we have 2 videos that we're going to run for you for the caboose tonight. The first one we're going to run was provided by Clark Kooning for us, and it's really a beautiful layout. that Clark has. Pat, if you could run that one for first.
Okay.
That is something. Clark, thank you so very much for providing that to us. We really do appreciate it. Phil, I don't know whether you have found that other one or not yet or not. If this is the one Dan sent me, this is his entrance to the Northeast Region Convention that was held in May. Mr. Cohen, I can't thank you enough. That is absolutely fantastic and a real accomplishment. Thank you for doing that in the Northeast region of the NMRA. I hope you had a great convention. Well, that's pretty well it tonight. Please, I hope you'll send me an email with the show segment that you most enjoyed. And we'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks for coming.